Do you have your results in front of you?
I do.
Okay, excellent. So let's begin then. Okay, so I'm going to start this obviously because you're going to have your listeners kind of listening, and they're going to want to know a little bit about what we do and how we do what we do, essentially. So the DNA company, which is the company that I represent, our focus, our true vision is the optimization of human health and performance. And we do that specifically through an intelligent understanding of your DNA. Okay, Dr. Mansour, who is my mentor and obviously the president and CEO of the company, he likes to describe DNA as a language of life. And in order to understand the language, you have to be fluent in that language. You have to know not only how to use words and letters and sentences, but you also have to know grammar, context, nuances, subtleties, etc. So you really have to be fluent in a language in order to understand it effectively. So I'm going to start this with a little bit of disclaimer. Personally, I myself, I'm not a clinician and I'm not a geneticist. I'm a pharmaceuticals professional who left the big bad industry to come here and work here with an amazing group of people, nonetheless, Dr. Mansour himself. And through my, the last few years spending time with him every day, I've managed to pick up a little bit of his knowledge. And I think I know enough at this point so that he won't nail me to the wall when I speak about genes. So I just want to say that because if there are any critical questions that arise from there, I wouldn't be capable of answering them effectively, but I can certainly take that feedback and get the answers. Okay, so with that being said, as I was saying, DNA, it's this interesting thing. Everyone has it, it's unique to us. And now, everyone has the same kind of genes. It's the variations or changes that happen in those genes that makes us unique, right? So all of us carry, the same kind of genes. It's just the changes. So, for example, you and I both have the BRCA1 gene. We may have variations in there, but it still exists in every single one of us. So what we do at the DNA company is something known as genomic storyboarding. And what that means is we look at the life of a patient or client, and they have a certain health status, they have certain health conditions, and certain health concerns, and then they have certain health outcomes that they'd like to achieve. So we say, okay, let's look at each one of your health concerns and determine the system in your body, whether cellular or whole body system, that is being impacted by your health concerns. So for example, I have a concern about heart health. Cardiovascular health is a big concern because 3 members of my immediate family have had cardiovascular disease, and I just want to, okay, then what we do is we create a storyboard from a genomic aspect. Now, what's the difference between genomics and genetics? Genetics is the study of genes. Genomics is the study of how genes interact with the environment, with your lifestyle. It's the interaction between your innate and genetic potential and the world around you. That's genomics. So when we do genomic storyboarding, we look at different biological cellular systems in your body and how they are influenced by the version of genes that you carry. And these genes are a specific type of genes. They're known as functional genes, meaning they have a specific function that impacts one aspect of your health. So the difference is there's a gene that determines your eye color. And the only function of that gene is to tell your eye color. But that gene doesn't play a role in how your health and lifestyle is determined. On the other hand, you have a gene such as the gene that determines the enzyme aromatase, which controls the change between testosterone and estrogen. That has a massive impact on how you function as an individual. First of all, it determines, your hormonal profile, how quickly you're creating certain sex hormones, and the impact of it. So we look at functional genes, and we look at it sort of storyboard because we want to understand the whole picture. A big problem with these new, at-home recreational DNA testing is you've got one gene and it must translate into one concern, and that's simply not the truth, right? It's not just one gene that determines one case. And furthermore, what's the scientific basis, validity of saying this gene causes this concern? And the truth is, it's not as simple as that. It's not as black and white as that in most cases. In some cases, for example, with cystic fibrosis or Huntington's, yes, there's one gene and a mutation will cause that disease. When it comes to functional health, when it comes to our overall health and lifestyle, the answer is rarely so simple. That's why I wanted to predicate this discussion we're about to have. There are 6 major pathways or sections that we look at with our testing. We look at executive function, which is the understanding of your unique emotional response to external stimuli. In other words, how does your brain take information and analyze information based on what's happening? That's executive function. We look at cardiovascular health. Now, understanding how genes influence certain aspects of your cardiovascular health. We then look at methylation. If I had to pick one word to describe methylation, I would say it's anti-inflammation, meaning what is your body's innate anti-inflammatory response? What's the response to inflammation in your body? For the most part, that can be explained by methylation. We look at detoxification. What is the ability of the body to produce an antioxidant known as glutathione? It's very famous, a lot of people know it. And the process of glutathionization, which allows the body to shuttle toxins, xenobiotics, whatever it is, out of the body through the liver. What's your actual innate capabilities and the impact or influence of the genes that control them? We look at steroidogenesis, the hormonal profile. Huge. Understanding for the first time, how does the body produce the 2 major sex hormones in every individual? Testosterone or androgens and estrogens. And then what is the implication of dominance in either of those hormones? We look at diet and metabolism. From a genetic perspective, what is your capability to feel full? Satiety. Do you feel full easily? Or does it take time to feel full? We look at your body's ability to break down certain food groups. How do you deal with carbs? How do you deal with sugars? How do you deal with fats? And then we look at what is your body's ability to create, to transport, and to absorb certain vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D. And so this allows us to help an individual determine what diet actually is going to work for them, right? We all know, CNN just released this article a few weeks ago that the ketogenic diet is the fastest growing diet in history. And no diet has grown as fast as ketogenic diet. But here's the thing. If your body cannot use fat molecules for energy purposes, the ketogenic diet is contradictory to your health goals, simply because your body cannot effectively break down fat molecules for energy usage. So the keto diet, while it's great for some people, is not great for everyone. In fact, it's harmful and dangerous for some people. Mm-hmm. And when you get into discussions about, well, it looks like genetically I can handle a ketogenic diet, what kind of ketogenic diet are you espousing? Are you saying steak and avocados every night, ketogenic diet? Because I can tell you there's a lot of people who are not going to do well on steak and avocados every night. If you are an individual who comes from the Mediterranean, or you come from the subcontinent, or you come from somewhere in Asia, the ketogenic diet, the North American ketogenic diet will not work for you. Your body simply wasn't built, through generations and generations and generations to eat steak and avocados. You've probably never eaten an avocado before if you're from that area. But a Mediterranean-based ketogenic diet is likely going to give you the biggest benefit. A diet that's high in olive oil, olive, fatty fish, sardines, mackerel, stuff that actually existed in your geographical area for generations and generations. Genes don't travel as fast as humans do, okay? So let's take myself, for example. This is a great way to get started. Yeah. I'm from the subcontinent, okay, from Pakistan. It's a country between India and Afghanistan, very close to the equator. For generations and generations and generations, my ancestors lived in an environment and a lifestyle that had ample access to the sun. The sun was out 12 to 16 hours a day. and we always had access to the sun. We were always outside. There were farmers, there were tillers, whatever they were. So people don't realize vitamin D is actually toxic at high enough levels. So if you produce too much vitamin D, it can be toxic to your health. So what happens when you're outside in the sun? The sun creates a version of vitamin D called D2. Right? That's the version you absorb from the sun. Now, in order for you to use vitamin D2, you have to convert it, right? You have to convert into vitamin D3, right? And the gene responsible for creating the enzyme that causes that conversion is known as, I'm just going to pull it up here, it is your CYP2R1. And what this gene does is converts D2 to D3. Now, if you're in the sun 12 to 16 hours a day, the gene that's converting the sun's vitamin D into usable vitamin D is going to be slow. The reason for that is you have ample access to sunlight. You don't need to convert all the D2 you're getting into D3 because guess what? It's toxic if you make too much of it. So for generations, we had access to the sun. So our genes evolved and ensured they were slow because we always had access to it. Now, you take a person like me, whose whole generation has lived there, and you plot me in Toronto, Canada, where I get, I don't have any sun 4 months out of the year. I go to work in the dark, I'll come back in the dark. On top of that, I'm spending 8 hours inside, not even outside in the sun. I'm going to have chronically low vitamin D because my genes didn't change. They didn't get the memo, right? The genes don't get the memo that you got to change into the fast version. Body doesn't work like that. So I'm chronically low in vitamin D. And guess what? The vitamin D that's recommended by most people, the 2000 IU, is not going to be enough for me. Now, there's a second part to it. How well do I transport the vitamin D that I've produced into the areas it needs to get? And if that bus that's supposed to pick up your vitamin D and take it to the place of impact isn't working very well, well, you could take 5, 10, 15,000 IU of vitamin D and you're not going to be able to use it all. If your bus has space for 2,500 and you take in 7,500, only 2,500 is going to get transported. So now not only am I chronically low in vitamin D, I also need to space out my vitamin D dosage, right? Now, the reason I'm mentioning this to you, Melanie, is that you have an optimal version of the transport, so the bus is working well, but the conversion is slow, which means you will, all things equal, have a lower level of vitamin D or have a vitamin D deficiency more than most people.
And
right?
I do. Yeah.
You go in and you check your serum vitamin D levels and you realize, you know what, that's true. And the 2000 IU isn't going to cut it. You're probably better off taking something closer to 4,000 or 5,000 IU split through the day. Simply, it's just what it is, right? It's a vitamin D deficiency we have. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. So it's stuff like this, information like this, that's so impactful because once you learn and you understand it, now you can start to structure your life, right? So if I know that I'm chronically low in vitamin D, well, what are the vitamin D fortified foods I should be eating? How much time should I be spending outside? What's the supplementation look like? What's the version of the vitamin that I need to take? That's the sort of information we can derive from this test. Let's quickly jump in now, and I'm going to get back to the front. We're going to talk about executive function for you, Melanie. Okay? So, executive function in our report is based on the analysis of 5 important genes. Okay, it's your COMT, BRD2, your ADRA2B, your 5-HTT-LPR, and your BDNF. These are 5 genes, and they control the axes of neurochemicals or neurotransmitters. So 4 out of the 5 genes are responsible for 3 major axes. Okay, so our body produces a class of molecules known as neurochemicals and neurotransmitters. We're talking about dopamine, we're talking about noradrenaline, we're talking about serotonin. And these neurotransmitters control our body's emotional response. So dopamine, for example, is it's known as a pleasure response. How well do you experience, or how quickly and how readily do you experience pleasure? Noradrenaline is known as the flight or fight response, right? It's the excitatory. It's the, how do I get my body in an active state as soon as I see something? And then serotonin is the happy, people like to describe it as the happy or the mood transmitter, right? Because it controls mood, eating, emotion. It's so much more than that, but that's what they like to minimize it to. So Genes influence your body's ability to deal with these neurotransmitters. And for you, Melanie, let's start with the first one. We're going to talk about dopamine. Dopamine is, as I mentioned, the pleasure neurotransmitter. What happens in the body is when you are about to experience a moment of pleasure, that can be anything. It could be like diving into a slice of cheesecake, or it could be sex. You could be excited about sex, or it could be something. You're about to do something that's going to give you some sort of pleasure. So the body prepares for that response. And what it does is dopamine molecules are released by the presynaptic, the neuron with the dopamine releases into the synaptic cleft. And then it's about to bind to receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, right? So that's the area where all the D2 receptors sit. And your readiness to bind to dopamine is determined by a gene known as DRD2, which determines the density, the number, the amount of receptors on that postsynaptic response. So the more dense the receptors, the more ready you are to experience pleasure. Like you want to get that pleasure right away. Once you bind to dopamine, the length of time that dopamine stays bound and you are experiencing that pleasurable response is dependent on another gene. That gene is known as COMT, catechol-O-methyltransferase. Its main function is to attach a methyl group to these dopamine molecules to inactivate them and prepare them for clearance. Okay? Now I'm talking about the enzyme COMT. The gene COMT builds the enzyme COMT, and the enzyme attaches the methyl group. Now, dependent on what type of COMT version of COMT gene you carry, you're going to have a different COMT enzyme. And so when we say an individual has a fast COMT, when we're talking about their gene, what we are saying is the version of COMT enzyme that this gene is going to produce is a faster version. In other words, it does its job faster. Okay? It's like you have one car shop that builds like a rickshaw or a bicycle, and then you have one shop that builds a Ferrari. Okay? And so the Ferrari will move faster and will get you to where you need to go faster. Same thing. So in your case, Melanie, you have a medium level COMT and you have a high DRD2. This is considered the optimal pleasure response. Okay? Because you experience pleasure quickly and you experience it for a good amount. It's moderate. It's not too long where you simply can't inhibit yourself from it, right? So if you have a slow COMT and you have a high DRD2, what happens is when you get into something you like something pleasurable, the part of your brain which controls inhibition, control, like diligence and control, becomes reduced because you're happy and your brain doesn't want you to stop from doing something happy. And when you have a slow COMT, it's all the more difficult for you to have some control. So what you're going to find is individuals like this often experience binge-like behaviors. They get into one slice of cake and they're like, no, I need 5 slices of cake because I don't have that control. It's just the way the brain works. In your case, it's not the case, but there are instances where you may experience something like that, where you may have a little bit less inhibition because yours isn't a fast COMT. Okay? The opposite. If you have a super fast COMT, right, what happens is you can't experience pleasure fast enough. What it means is it takes a little bit more for you to experience a good amount of pleasure, but then it's gone as soon as you experience it. What do these individuals start to show? Reward-seeking behavior. Because they always want it. They always want to jump into it. They always want to access it, right? So that's just one gene I'm talking about there in how it controls. Now, the next gene is the ADRA2B. That gene determines how quickly your body enters an active state, meaning how quickly can your body turn on to prepare you for something, okay? So, a quick example, you're walking down the street and you didn't see the beware of dog sign, and all of a sudden, boom, right? Like a dog barks at you. What happens to your body? You tense up, your blood flow increases, skeletal muscle gets dense, your brain starts becoming more active, you're vigilant, all of that is controlled by the release of noradrenaline. And now in a normal circumstance, the same COMT that inactivates dopamine also inactivates the noradrenaline. But the difference is the receptor for adrenaline is not like the receptor for dopamine. In dopamine, the density determines the readiness. In here, it's on and off, right? So when you have a deletion, which is one of the variations that our company tests for, that no other company tests for, when you have a deletion within your ADRA2B gene, your receptor stays on for longer. Okay? So when a person who has a deletion experiences a sudden event, they stay emotionally active for a longer period of time. Whereas you're walking down the street, some dog barks and you're like, whoa, I got scared, but I'm able to understand that I'm not worried, right? The dog barked, but he's behind the cage. I'm just going to walk and I'm going to continue on with my day. Well, for some people who have a deletion within their day, that bark affects them for a longer period of time. So for the next block, they're checking to make sure there's no more dogs that are going to bark at them, right? Very similarly, when those individuals get into a heightened argument or a discussion, the emotional impact of that discussion stays with them for a longer period of time. They find themselves repeating the argument in their head a little bit longer. They find themselves bothered by that argument a little bit longer. They find themselves easier to recall the events of that argument a little bit longer, simply because the receptor has stayed on for a longer period of time. So they're still emotionally active, right? So in your case, Melanie, you have a partial deletion in your ADRA2B. And it's not going to be as pronounced as full deletions, but you will notice from time to time that it's, when you get emotionally activated or excited, it takes a little bit longer for you to get back to that, that resting state, right? It takes a little bit longer. And then when you go through life, things that bothered you, when you recall them, you jump back into that excited state, right? You remember, I really didn't like the way he spoke to me or she spoke to me. And it's going to bother you for for a little bit longer. So some of the things we like to notice here. The third axis we're going to talk about is serotonin, the serotonergic axis that determines your body's ability to regulate serotonin reuptake. Now, serotonin works a little bit differently than the other guys. The body produces a certain amount of serotonin, it releases it, you have the serotonergic reaction, and the body reuptakes the same serotonin. In and then out, in and out. What happens is sometimes there's a deletion within a polymorphism. A polymorphism is just a chain of amino acids that's occurring within a gene. And when you have a deletion within this gene marker or polymorphism, what happens is the gene responsible for serotonin transport doesn't work as effectively. What's the outcome? Well, individuals like this have a far more difficult time addressing external stimuli based on their urgency. So, a very good example is I'm sitting here speaking to you. We're having a conversation. And if somewhere upstairs, let's say my wife or my daughter are running across the top of the thing, and I'm having a conversation with you, if I have a deletion, it's going to be harder for me to focus on the conversation at hand because of the noise upstairs. Some people can totally shut it off and put it in the back. Okay, I've heard the clock ticking, and that's not important, I put it in the back of my mind. But for some people, they can't do that. They're working, they're typing the email, and the tick, tick, tick eventually gets so annoying, they have to get up and turn off the clock and come back and do their work. That's actually a serotonergic response. What it has to do is your ability to classify stimuli based on their urgency. Do I really need to address this right now? No or yes. And if you have a deletion, it's harder to say no, right? This is one of the things we look at. And in your case, you have the perfectly long version. That's not a concern for you, obviously. But for those individuals who do the test and realize, you know what? I feel like I can't work unless I've washed all the dishes or unless I put everything away, or the conditions have to be just right for me to write this email. And individuals that generally have deletions in their serotonin transport. And then the final gene we're going to talk about, BDNF, is responsible for creating a neurotrophin. Now notice, neurochemicals and neurotrophins are two different things. Dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline are neurochemicals. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is a neurotrophic. And the main job of BDNF is to help maintain neurons, the life cycle of neurons. Neurons are brain cells. They're literally the cells of the brain are called neurons. And how we communicate is through neurons, right? So neuronal information is passed through neurons like this, right? And then the space between those two neurons is how information is transferred. Now, what happens now, and there's a very interesting point here. The brain, when it experiences trauma, you can have a damage occur to neurons. And trauma can come in 3 different ways. It can come as physical trauma, like literally you banged your head somewhere and you had a concussion. Or it can be mental trauma, like you just heard that your best friend passed away suddenly. Sometimes you hear that, I heard that my friend passed away and I was shell-shocked, right? The word shell-shocked. That's literally describing the physical characteristics of a concussion. And people didn't realize that your neurons can become just as damaged from mental trauma as they can from physical trauma. So hearing about the passing of a dearly loved one, or hearing about, God forbid, a diagnosis of cancer in the late stage, can often leave a person showing symptoms of a concussion, because it works the same way. Neurons become damaged, right? So some of these neurons shut off, right? They start shutting off. And so now you're not passing as much information through. The job of BDNF is to generate other neurons in its place. You generate new neuronal pathways, which allows for information to be transferred. And so when a person has low BDNF, because the gene responsible for producing it is suboptimal, they don't produce enough of it. When they don't produce enough of it, they're at greater risk from the complications of brain trauma. It doesn't increase them in a risk for having trauma, because that's uncontrollable. But when you do experience trauma, the ability for you to recover from that brain trauma is more difficult in the presence of a suboptimal gene. And in your case, you have the full, the optimal version. We're not concerned, right?
That's good.
So that's your executive function. Well, I just wanted to. I'm not going to do that with every gene system, because I'd be talking for hours. But I just wanted to give you and your listeners an idea of how much science and how much impact you can derive from a single system. Like what I described there is from 5 genes. The entire emotional response of an individual can be explained by 5 genes, right? That's just one system. Now I'm going to talk about systems that I think you need to know about, the ones that are good. So for example, I'm looking at cardiovascular health. We have a generally excellent cardiovascular health profile. When we look at cardiovascular health, there's 2 things we're mostly concerned about. And these are the root causes of cardiovascular health. We're not looking at symptomatology. We're not looking at cholesterol numbers. We're not looking at all those stuff. We are looking at what are the root causes of cardiovascular disease. And what it comes down to is your body's propensity or likeliness to become inflamed, to have inflammation, and your body's response to that inflammation. Okay, that is a huge aspect of cardiovascular disease. When it comes to your blood vessels, which transport blood in your body, blood vessels are like pipes, and pipes need good insulation, right? The inner lining, the inner insulation of that pipe needs to be well lubricated in order for whatever's passing through to pass through effectively. Now what happens is your genes control how well your lubrication is. Some people have what I like to call Teflon coating. Okay, like that non-stick pan with the Teflon? You can buy 2 kinds of non-stick pans. You can buy a kind that you got from, I don't know, what's a famous, like Crate and Barrel or Williams-Sonoma or some high-end store. You're going to get like a Langostina or something, I don't know, $500 non-stick pan. It's going to work fantastic. Or you can buy a dollar store Teflon pan. They both have Teflon coating. It's just, there's a huge difference. So some people have super Teflon, great coating. Other people have dollar store coating. And when you have dollar store coating, how do you treat that pan? If you have a crappy pan, you're not going to use metal to cook in that pan. You're going to use wooden spoons, and you're going to be careful how you rub it and how you wash it and how you clean it, because it's not such a good pan. So you got to be careful. The same applies to your blood vessels. Some individuals have excellent endothelial sensitivity, meaning their endothelium or the inner lining of their blood vessel is not easily inflamed by toxins, whether it's smoke, mold, environmental toxins, internal toxins like estrogen metabolites, fatty foods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens when you have poor endothelial lining? Well, what happens is toxins attach themselves to the lining and cause inflammation. When inflammation occurs, the natural response of the body is to release a lubricant to massage the endothelium and reduce the inflammation. That lubricant is known as cholesterol, okay? And there are two proteins responsible for this whole system. A protein that transports cholesterol to the site of inflammation, and a protein that removes cholesterol once the inflammation has passed. The protein that transports it is known as LDL, low density lipoproteins. The protein that removes cholesterol is known as HDL. Now you can see all of a sudden why people for some reason call LDL bad cholesterol and HDL good cholesterol. Oh, your bad cholesterol is high and your good cholesterol is low. Well, no. There's actually a bigger concern there. You have a higher level of LDL. What that means is you have a lot of inflammation in your body. And your LDL count increase is the response. So when you take a drug like a statin, for example, which lowers LDL levels, you're only treating the body's response, but who's treating the inflammation? And so that's why you'll have people who have multiple MIs, myocardial infarctions, multiple stents in their body, but their cholesterol levels are fine. Well, obviously, there's some concerns there that have nothing to do with the cholesterol levels, right? So this is just another thing, it's root cause that we're looking at, etiology, not symptomatology. And overall, Melanie, for you, I don't have any concerns with your cardiovascular health. Just a little bit in terms of hypertension, your response to salt. I want to be a little bit careful there because your ACE gene, your angiotensin converting enzyme, the gene responsible for producing that enzyme is suboptimal. So your response to salt and hypertension is going to be a little bit suboptimal. And you may notice that either in yourself or your family members, high blood pressure, hypertension, salt, sensitivities. That's the only thing I would mention to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Notice the salt, it always makes me swell. Just immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just, it's clear from what we see here. The other thing I'm going to talk to you about, Melanie, specifically in your case, is methylation. And what I see from your methylation profile is, methylation is the process by which the body transports methyl groups between cells into and outside of cells. And this is generally how the body deals with inflammation. So generally, if you have a good methylation profile, you have a good anti-inflammation profile. Your body can respond to inflammation very well. However, when you have a suboptimal methylation profile, your response to inflammation isn't as great. And what that translates to is when you get bitten by a bug like a mosquito, those bug bites tend to be inflamed larger and longer than most people, right? It's an inability for the body to reduce inflammation. You may suffer from brain fog, migraines, because the inflammation that's occurring in the brain, harder to deal with. If inflammation occurs in your muscle and nerve fibers, individuals with poor methylation profiles tend to struggle with fibromyalgia, tend to have issues with chronic fatigue syndrome, tend to have issues with neuropathy, because the inflammation that's occurring in the nerves or in the muscle fibers isn't appropriately being addressed, okay? So when we talk about your own methylation profile, we do see a little bit of suboptimability in that, okay? Your SHMT1 in particular is suboptimal. That's controlling your conversion of your of the folate methyl profile. So very important point here. If I were you, I would be making sure I'm doing two things. I'm taking a good source of cobalamin, B12, and a good source of folate, the B9. Now, here's where the science shows that it's not just the type of vitamin you're taking, it's the form of each vitamin, okay? You know, and Mel, you're in functional health, you've dealt with all these natural health people. The darling of methylation in the last 5-10 years has been 5-MTHF. Okay, everyone takes 5-MTHF as their source. What is 5-MTHF? It's an activated version of folate that already has a methyl group attached to it. Here's the problem. When you have a suboptimal SHMT1 gene, and this gene is converting, remember, it's converting THF, tetrahydrofolate, into 5-10-methylene, so one of the precursors. The gene responsible for causing that conversion to prepare it for entry into the nucleus of the cell isn't functioning appropriately. Now you give these individuals a pre-methylated folate and you're asking for trouble. You are literally asking, because you're going to over-methylate these individuals. And for some people, if it's especially bad, it's literally dangerous to their health to be taking 5-MTHF. Because you're providing a pre-methylated version of a donor for which the body can't appropriately deal with. Like the methylation profile is a cycle, it's a profile. It has to flow from one end to the other. If there's suboptimality anywhere, you can actually hypermethylate or overmethylate people, right? So you have to be careful, right? What we have found is the most effective form of folate is adenosylfolate, also known as folinic acid. Not folic acid, folinic acid, because it's much easily used by the body as it is required. The body can effectively use adenosylfolate much better than 5-MTHF or folic acid. And so these are just some of the things we notice here. And the other major cycle we look at is B12. There is an actual gene that determines how well we absorb B12 in our gut. Remember, B12 absorption can occur in the gut, and the gene responsible for creating the enzyme fucosyl transferase is known as FUT2. Now, the FUT2 gene, if it's suboptimal, you're not producing enough of the enzyme to effectively absorb B12 in your gut. Well, guess what? If you're taking an oral B12 tablet and your gene isn't working effectively, you could be taking thousands of micrograms, milligrams, grams, and it's all being peed out. You're just having expensive urine, okay? It's important. But what do you have to do? You have to take it in a way that gets to the bloodstream, and that is sublingually, directly to the source. Now, if your body can't use cyanocobalamin, you need to pre-methylate it. Some people, your MTRR and your MTR are responsible for methylating cobalamin as a methyl donor. If they can't do that, you're not using that B12 appropriately. So you have to take a sublingual methylated B12. And sometimes you take a sublingual adenosyl B12 or hydroxy B12. Because even methyl B12, if you don't use it the right way, you can start getting headaches, migraines, brain fog, because you're over methylating yourself. And that's why the science of what we do is so steeped in, understanding individuals and their individual capacity. Okay, so vitamins, the same set of vitamin is not going to work for everyone. Everyone needs to take a personalized dose. So, Melanie, with that being said, you have a little bit of suboptimal profile, right? So your response to information, you're going to notice this yourself. It's going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little bit harder. The bug bites might be a little bit more inflamed. You might have some flares, right? Muscle and nerve pain flares from time to time. The body's inability to respond to inflammation appropriately. Okay? And what I recommend is taking a good B complex, B50 with the right type of folate, as I mentioned. Avoid, in your personal case, I'm not a clinician, but my suggestion after working with many clinicians and many patients here is to suggest not to take a 5-MTHF, but take a folinic acid instead. And you're going to see a world of difference.
That's awesome. My vitamins arrive tomorrow, actually. So.
Okay, excellent. And I'm sure we have folinic acid in there for you.
You do. You do.
I'm just going to run here. Let's see what we have here. Okay, let's quickly talk about diet and metabolism because it's important. A lot of people want to know, what can my genes tell me about my diet and my metabolism? They can tell you a lot. There's three important factors or principles when we talk about diet and metabolism. Number one is your ability to feel full, satiety, right? Am I satiated? Satiety is not satisfaction. two different things. Satiety means, are you full? Satisfaction means, are you satisfied? Sometimes you can be full, but not satisfied. The vice versa is also true. You can be hungry, but you're satisfied because you ate something that you like, right? So satiety is directly linked to weight gain and obesity, particularly in children for some of the genes we look at. So when your body, your stomach, is incapable of communicating to your mind that you've had enough, you don't know when to stop. So if you have suboptimal genes controlling the satiety response, you're that individual that loves to go to a buffet and that doesn't know when to stop when they're in a buffet, right? Just keep going, keep going. All of a sudden you've gone through 4 plates and you're like, ooh, now I'm full, but I'm like up here full. I'm not full, I'm like up here full, right? And so it all comes down to, do I feel full? And sometimes your body can't tell your mind fast enough that you feel full. So in your case, Melanie, there's a little bit of suboptimality in both your ability to feel full and your ability to become full. Two things. Do I feel full throughout the day? And how much do I need to eat to become full? Yeah, there's a little bit of suboptimality. It's not super bad, a little bit in both. So you may notice from time to time that you're a snacker. You like to snack, right? You like to have a little bowl of something and you snack on it from time to time. And when you think about snacking, you like to have something to eat. Now the other problem is when you're snacking and it's the same kind of snack, like it's pistachios, and you're not focused on it, you can go through a bowl and you don't even notice. Like, oh, holy crap! I just finished a bowl of pistachios. The reason for that is satiety has a lot to do with the sensory profile of your mouth. In other words, how many sensory profiles in your mouth are you hitting in order to feel full? So there's salty, sour, bitter, sweet, there's crunchy texture, there's smooth texture, there's the umami, right? There's so many different profiles in your mouth. And the quicker you achieve as many sensory profiles as possible, the faster you're gonna feel full. So when you think about the most popular snacks today, what are they? They're trail mixes. Nuts, cranberries, a little bit of dark chocolate or white chocolate in there. They're combining as many sensory profiles in one snack, so you don't have to eat as much. You'll notice, you can't go necessarily, some people can, but not a lot of people can go through a whole bowl of trail mix, but they can certainly go through a whole bowl of chips. Right? Potato chips, gone. It's because the body is searching for the rest of the sensory profiles. So if you don't give that body that rest of the sensory satisfaction, you're just gonna keep doing it, right? That's just one thing I wanted to mention. The second thing is your ability to metabolize certain food groups. Obviously, the two major ones are carbs and fats. Generally, we've found that individuals who metabolize fats tend to metabolize carbs poorly and vice versa. Okay? Very rare that we'll see a person who can metabolize both efficiently or both poorly, unless they've had, if they're a mixed race, so they have one, I know an individual who was a poor metabolizer of fats and carbs, and we were kind of confused why it's possible. He says, "Oh, I'm half Mexican, half American." Well, the Mexicans are horrible fat metabolizers, and the Americans are horrible carb metabolizers, right? And so when you have a mixture of the both, you were genetically unblessed. You got worse of both worlds. And so your diet profile, you have to be really careful in that case because you have to manage the carbs and fats you eat. So you're looking at a paleo-centric diet for an individual like that, right? In your case, Melanie, there's no real what I would say relationship between weight gain and fat for you. I mean, it's a reduced association, but the bigger concern is the starch metabolism, right? So your body and starch metabolism is controlled by an enzyme in your mouth, in your saliva, known as amylase. And the gene that controls amylase production is called AMY1. And when you have a suboptimal version, your body doesn't effectively break down carbs in the mouth before they enter the gut. And when it doesn't break down them, it just turns to storable fat. And so what you will see is you start to eat a lot of carbs, starches, rice, potatoes, pasta, you will notice weight gain occurring much quicker than if you weren't eating those food groups, right? Something to keep in mind. Okay, and then finally, this is going back to the vitamins I spoke to you about, right? So the vitamin D example I've already given you. How we transport and produce certain vitamins and convert them to active forms is heavily influenced by our genes. And if we're not doing that appropriately, then we need to understand not only how much we need to take of a vitamin, but how to take it. Do I take it all at once, or do I split it up in this case? And when you have poor transport, you want to split up that dose. Okay. In your case, you have good transport. It's not as much of a concern. But for some individuals, they're going to find that they test for their vitamin D. The vitamin D levels are good, but they're still having the issues of low vitamin D, the brittle bones, the osteoporosis, etc. It's because the body isn't effectively transporting the vitamin D to where it needs to get. Okay. Okay, let's talk about detox quickly. Detox is one of my favorite subjects because it explains a lot about people and you don't realize it. Your body's ability to detoxify itself of many toxins, as I mentioned, which include mold, bacteria, toxins, alcohol, byproducts, perfumes, colognes, whatever it is. Your body's ability to detoxify itself of toxins is heavily dependent on genes. Now, the genes that determine the ability of the body to produce glutathione are known as the glutathione transferase family of genes. What we have been able to do, that no other companies have been able to do so far, is test for a variation that determines the number of each gene you carry. So one thing is to have a variation within the gene that either makes it work not as well or makes it work quite well. Another is whether or not you even have the gene. Okay? In some cases, the entire gene can be deleted. It doesn't exist, meaning you don't have the gene. And so your ability to produce glutathione is markedly reduced. On the flip side, sometimes you can have 2 copies of the gene. When you have 2 copies of the gene, you're literally working a double the efficiency. And sometimes, in exceedingly rare cases, you can have 3 copies of the gene. These are your super detoxifiers. So these guys can drink an entire keg and not have a hangover in the morning. These are the guys who can take 15, 20, 25 capsules of supplements a day and actually benefit from them. Let me be clear. The average human body was not designed to take 20 capsules a day. You've seen those super dosers and big dose. Body doesn't work like that. Okay? The liver, the kidneys can only handle, so even if they're natural products, okay? I'm not even talking about drugs right now. I'm talking about natural ingredients. The body simply was not designed to absorb that many ingredients at one time and effectively use it all, which is why you find yourself peeing out a lot of your vitamins initially. You have to adapt. You have to allow your body to adapt dosage. So you start at a lowest effective dose and you move forward, increasing the dose bit by bit. Now, when you are unable to detoxify appropriately, and Melanie, this is important because in your case, you actually have a deletion, an entire deletion of the gene, and you're missing one of the 2 important copies of the most important genes. Your ability to detoxify is going to be lower than most people. What that translates to is a higher propensity for brain fog, fatigue, tiredness, lack of energy. You might be the one individual who, when they walk through the perfume section of a mall, you stay around the perfumes too long, start getting that headache, start feeling something here, just brain fog. You got to get out of there as soon as possible. And it's not the perfume; it's the cyclic hydrocarbons found in the actual perfume that's causing that reaction. Where this becomes a concern, the poor detox becomes a concern, is when you look at an individual, particularly females, and I'm going to transition right into the hormone section now. Okay? One of the major jobs of detoxification is to clear out the byproducts of estrogen metabolism. Okay? So quick explanation on hormones. Every individual on the planet produces sex hormones, androgens and estrogens. Both males and females produce progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. In fact, there's no estrogen molecule in your body that wasn't previously a testosterone molecule. And there's no testosterone molecule in your body that previously wasn't a progesterone molecule. So everyone has the same cycle. What it comes down to is what is the dominance in the cycle for males and females. Males can be androgen dominant, producing a lot more androgens like testosterone, or estrogen dominant. When you're estrogen dominant as a male, you got two things going for you. You're gonna have hair until you die, and you're gonna have great skin until you die. Because estrogen is promoter of good skin, and it also promotes healthy hair. So personally, I'm estrogen dominant. Okay? It does not mean I'm effeminate. It doesn't mean I'm gonna have feminine characteristics. But what it does mean is I'm gonna have a lot more difficulty achieving, a striated muscular look, no matter how hard I hit the gym. Because I have low levels of testosterone compared to the average person, so my water retention, my muscle retention is going to be lower, right? So there's pros and cons. When you're androgen dominant as an individual, as a male, you put on muscle like no problem, right? You jump in the gym for a week and you've got the bulging muscles all of a sudden. It's so easy for you to put on muscle, and you're generally lean. You don't have a lot of fat issues. But what you will notice later on in life is you start to lose your hair. It goes from thinning, and all of a sudden it's balding, right? So now there's male pattern baldness involved. And even more concerning is androgen dominant males are at greater risk of benign prostate hyperplasia and enlarged prostate. Okay? Because androgen dominant males generally tend to produce a higher amount of DHT. And DHT, dihydrotestosterone, is like your testosterone on testosterone. It's the super testosterone, right? One molecule of DHT is generally equivalent to 20 molecules of testosterone. So, on the flip side, women who are androgen dominant, very similar, right? Lean, muscular physique. You pick an Instagram model on fitness Instagram model, and you're like, oh, it's so easy. You just do 16 crunches a day and you'll get abs like that. And the average woman's like, no, right? That's not happening. Some women are genetically blessed, right? So they're, they've got the lean, they can put on muscle easier. But remember, there's other concerns. Women who can put on muscle easier like that generally have smaller breasts, they have narrower hips, right? So I can tell you right now, if there's a fitness model who's super jacked and ripped and she's got nice, she's well developed here, they most certainly aren't real, because you can't get that physique unless you use something plastic. I can guarantee you that, right? It's just not possible. Estrogen drives tissue and fat tissue development and storage in secondary female characteristics and areas. So the other issues for androgen dominant women is difficulty in achieving pregnancy, polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, big concern, hair thinning, right? They're going to start losing their hair faster, and hirsutism, which is excess body hair. You are going to see that in androgen dominant women. Now, let's talk about estrogen dominant women. Okay, estrogen dominant women, the classic, stereotypical feminine physique, the curvy physique, larger breast development, wider hips, more built towards childbirthing, for example. But there's concerns. There's concerns about cellulite. Okay, these women have a big issue with cellulite. No matter how hard they're in the gym, how well they eat, they will always struggle with cellulite. And they're also going to have issues with weight gain, right? You could have a perfectly normal, healthy, active lifestyle and struggle with weight gain simply because of hormonal imbalances. It happens. The biggest concern for estrogen dominant women is what is happening to your estrogen after you produce it. Okay? Estrogen is converted into three major metabolites: 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, 16 alpha hydroxy estrogen. Of these three, one is good for you. It's actually protective for women. It's called 2-hydroxy estrogen. The other two are bad boys, especially your 4-hydroxy estrogen. There's two reasons for this. One, 4-hydroxy estrogen retains estrogenizing properties, and that's dangerous for women to have a buildup of these metabolites. Number two, 4-hydroxy estrogen can be broken down further into byproducts known as quinones and ROS, reactive oxygen species. Both of these are potent inflammatory agents, but specifically quinones induce DNA damage in your cells. They actually cause DNA damage in cells. And you know where they cause the most damage, or where they're concentrated? In areas where estrogen is concentrated. Well, think about where estrogen is concentrated: in the breasts and the ovaries. And so as a result, individuals who are estrogen dominant and producing 4-hydroxy estrogen, in other words, estrogen toxic, have a higher risk of estrogen-based diseases like breast cancer, like ovarian cancer. Okay, we've seen it time and time again. It is considered a potent root cause of the development of these diseases. And we're talking outside of the genetic diagnostic risk. We're not even talking about BRCA genes at this point. We're talking about, remember the BRCA gene, what's the job of the BRCA gene? It repairs DNA damage. So it's like the fire truck when there's a fire. When there's a fire, you send a fire truck. So when people say, I have a BRCA mutation, so I'm at greater risk of breast cancer, well, yes, because your fire truck isn't working. But what's causing the fire in the first place? It's the 4-hydroxyestrogen molecule. They're the ones inducing the fire. So one of the things in the body, there's two ways the body deals with these metabolites. Number one is a COMT gene. Okay? The COMT gene methylates 4-hydroxyestrogen just like it methylates dopamine and noradrenaline. Okay? When it methylates these metabolites, it deactivates them so they can't be broken down further into quinones and ROS. And when you have a slow COMT gene, that job isn't being done. And so there's more of these molecules, you're estrogen dominant, estrogen toxic, you have a slow COMT. You know, a lot of, you're in a real risk here. Your body is a secondary mechanism to help you out, and that's the detoxification cycle, okay? Because the detoxification cycle effectively clears out ROSs and quinones. That's the job. It breaks them down, throws them for release. And so now you can see how everything's tying together, right? Hormonal profile, dominance, toxicity, methylation. Methylation is working. Detoxification, that's not working. So when we look at your own results, right, we can see, Melanie, you produce a good amount of progesterone to testosterone. Your CYP17A1 makes a good amount of testosterone. Now, what happens is your testosterone can do one of three things. It can become DHT, it can become estrogen, or it can get cleared out. In your case, Melanie, your conversion DHT is slow, which is actually good, and your clearance is average. Okay, that's not bad either. But the concern is you're actually a more estrogenized individual. You produce a lot of that estrogen. And furthermore, you have a fast-working CYP1B1. The 4-hydroxyestrogen molecule seems to be the molecule that's working the fastest in your body. Right? So we have a little bit of a concern here. What we want to do is when we identify this, you're going to notice these things, right? You're going to notice things like, you know, some individuals who have estrogen dominant toxicity, they feel tenderness in the breasts during their menstrual cycle. They have issues with endometriosis. They have excessive bleeding. This is stuff that's normal for individuals with estrogen toxicity. And the goal is, how do we effectively deal with this concern? Now you can imagine, right, and you're a functional medicine practitioner, you know, we know of hormone replacement therapy, right? HRT treatment. HRT treatment can be an effective, impactful treatment for individuals, but not for everyone. Because guess what happens when you put hormone replacement analogs, you put similar, you know, hormones in your body, and you're estrogen dominant? Well, it's a cascade. You know what a cascade is? Everything you put, no matter where in the cycle you put it, ends up at the bottom. And if your bottom is estrogen toxicity, doesn't matter whether you're taking DHEA, progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, it will all end up in the same bucket. So we have to be careful, number one. Number two, are there natural ingredients out there that can act as natural aromatase inhibitors? The answer is yes. Are they clinically validated? The answer is yes again. We have determined a number of natural ingredients that have been clinically studied to help modulate the aromatase response. Ingredients like DIM, diindole methane, I3C, indole-3 carbinol, resveratrol. These are all ingredients that can help manage the aromatase response. And so if I were you, Melanie, and you're going to see in your formulation, you are going to find a dosage of DIM. You're going to find a dosage of resveratrol. Right? These are ingredients where we're dosing them out at the appropriate level to ensure that we're not saying that, and I'm on record here, we do not claim to change gene expression. We're not saying that. But what we are saying is there are clinically studied natural ingredients out there that have shown in clinical studies to impact the expression of a gene, whether it's directly or impacting the enzyme that the gene produces. And what our job to do is we combine these world and best-in-class versions of these natural ingredients into a formulation and then provide it to you as one of the solutions. Now you can see everything I've talked to you about your genes, not everything needed a supplement. If I told you how you respond to food, there's no supplement that's going to change that. What that requires is a lifestyle change, is a change in your diet. It's a change in how you look at food. There was no supplement involved. But there are certain concerns. A poor detox, I can tell you right now, what you're going to find in your formulation is N-acetylcysteine, which supports glutathione production. It's a precursor. You're going to find alpha lipoic acid, which fits as part of the glutathinization cycle. Methylation, you're going to find methyl donors, methyl substrates in your formulation. So there's a time and place for changes in lifestyle, nutrition, environment, exercise, and there's a place for supplements. But one of the issues with the natural health products industry is, so let's backtrack. I came from the pharmaceutical industry. Okay? I came from allopathic medicine. I was in early formulation development, building billion-dollar drugs. And we know the impact of these drugs. Generally, they try to treat one condition and give you 5 other conditions. I moved away from that industry and I came into natural health products. Well, guess what the problem I found in natural health products industry is this idea, there's 2 big problems. Pixie dusting, which is like, let me put 20 ingredients at like super micro dosages, which isn't going to really do much, and you're just going to pee it out, which is your basic multivitamin. You go to Centrum and you buy a multivitamin, that's what you're getting, garbage. Or bioavailability, microdosing. But then there's also the issue of hyperdosing. Look at some of the products out there, and you're seeing 200, 250 milligrams of DIM, right? What's the actual clinical basis of using DIM for aromatase inhibition? Well, when you look at the actual studies, they only use 50 milligrams. 50 milligrams showed the impact of inhibiting aromatase activity. So why are you dosing at 200 milligrams? What's this idea of hyperdosing? That's what, as a company, we're trying to change. We're trying to change this idea, bring some sanity back into this industry about dosing appropriately, dosing adaptively, and dosing on a personalized level. That's what we do, right? In some ways, you could call us an anti-supplements company. We're not a supplement, we're an anti-supplements company. Because what we're saying is, take everything you need at the dosage you need, but none of what you don't need. And if you don't need it, you don't need it. Okay? We've had people, that's the beauty of working with us, we've had people who do the test, and they have a phenomenal genomic profile. So why am I going to sell you a supplement? The fact of the matter remains, you don't need a supplement. Some people can buy the test, and just have the test, and they report, and they can go about making lifestyle decisions, environmental decisions, nutrition decisions, or they can purchase supplements because guess what? There's things in their genetic profile that they specifically need support for, and we're going to give you that support at clinically validated dosages. I've taken a lot of your time. I apologize. I've been talking for too long. I hope this was impactful, it was knowledgeable, it provided you a little bit of clarity on what we're doing, how we're using genomics to really impact people's lives. And I look forward to any questions you have. You can ask me right now. If any of your patients have questions, please feel free to send them to me. I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure. Harris, thank you so much, because I am so looking forward to being able to offer this to my patients.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. Instead of the shotgun approach, like I feel we have most often toward the supplementation, even with some basic testing, it just still doesn't tell you how much do they actually need, and then are they able to actually use this. So, this is my youtrients profile here. It's pretty thick, but it did answer quite a few questions for me that I had, like taking vitamin D for years, but really not seeing any results at all. And then I have a history of endometriosis, heavy bleeding, and then a subsequent hysterectomy. So because of the estrogen dominance.
Right. Yeah. It's just, we do this time and time again. We show people the impact of functional genes, right? We're not looking at genes at a superficial 23andMe. This isn't your 23andMe test. This is an assessment at the functional genomic level. We're storyboarding your life from a genomic perspective and allowing you as the patient. And here's the beauty, but when we work with a clinician like you, the patient feels empowered because they're knowledgeable. the reason why vitamin D didn't work for me is because of this. Now I take this version and I feel better. Well, yes, because you understood exactly how your body deals with vitamin D. And that's what people want. They want to know what they're doing to their body so they feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And I do primarily hormone work. So for me, this is so imperative.
Absolutely.
All tested so that we are giving them the right amounts at the right times and with the right supplements to help them use it and clear it out appropriately.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Listen, I'm glad we had a chance to chat. It was beautiful. It was a great experience.
Thank you so much, Harris. Have a wonderful night. I know it's very late
Thank
for
you so much. No worries. Pleasure. Take care, guys. Bye.
Take care.